Hello everyone, my name is Nathan and today it's time for the final episode of this save game. I'm already in the planning phase for the next save game, which is going to be my greatest thus far. Since I started the Oxygen Not Included Let's Plays, my strategies and knowledge about the game have improved vastly, and I believe I will be able to give you a great experience for the next playthrough with everything taken on board that I've learned. Now, in this current save game, I still had to fix a couple of things. It was actually not as dramatic as I anticipated. We did have some food shortage, which was for one simple reason. You can see these plants here have grown into spindly grub fruit plants, while these plants here, the very same plant, have developed into grub fruit plants. The grubs are the reason these plants are different. The thing is, there are two separate recipes for that. So the roast grub fruit nut is actually made from the spindly grub fruit. I did not have that recipe activated, and since we were mostly getting the spindly grub fruit, I wasn't producing any food. You can now see we once again have 48,000 calories. I'm sending over the omelets into my second world, so the food shortage here is improving as well. So that was basically my only problem. With that out of the way, we actually have solved all the immediate problems we had in this world. Now it's running on its own again. You can also see all the arbor trees have now been planted, which means I would want to remove my pips again from this area, and we might want to bring them back up here. Actually, let's just put them here into my critter holding cell, but I do not want them to eat the branches anymore. Right now, everything is running. I did have some overheating issues that I took care of by just decreasing the temperature in this aqua tuner. But I've left the game running for approximately 10 cycles now without having to interfere. One thing that happens every now and then is that these guys get overcrowded. I'm not sure why they don't work as automatically as all the other farms. The population control actually works with the other farms with the system I have implemented here, but for some reason that doesn't apply to the grubs. So that is the only thing I sometimes have to interfere. At the moment, I'm still collecting the resources that are on the floor, which there aren't many of left. Maybe in the cellar there are a couple of them, but other than that, we're doing pretty good. Now, in this episode, I don't want to start anything new. I rather want to plan ahead for the next playthrough. Now, this week, I have a ton of work to do in real life, so it might take a couple of days for me to actually make the next video. I will have to see. But yeah, I'm really glad we can leave this save game here in dignity. This obviously is just going to be a show around what we have done so far, and maybe talk a little bit about the plans for the next series. But it would be absolutely amazing if you could join in the next series, because as I said, it's going to be the greatest one I've ever made, and it's going to be for the beginners and also for advanced players with the building and recording style I have in mind. I will also include much more rocket stuff in the next series. We're gonna get to that much sooner than you might anticipate, so it's not gonna take another 40 episodes to get to the same stage. We're gonna do a totally different approach. You're not gonna see the same builds all over again. We wanna pay much more attention to ratios and making the perfectly balanced builds in the updated world. Obviously, we will also explore space a little bit more since there are 2 more planets to visit, which is going to be a lot of fun. And of course, we're also going to deal with the nuclear stuff and everything that has been implemented in the past couple of months. So I'm really looking forward to it. At the moment, I'm basically just waiting for something else to fail in order to determine whether or not we can leave this save game in dignity, you know. But I have to say, it is looking really good. As mentioned, the grubs are the only thing that's not working, and I have these eggs in here. So additional eggs should be cracked. I'm really not sure why it's not working the same way. Got some more printables, glass, okay, taking that. At the moment, both of our geysers are actually dormant, which is why we don't have any water in here. This could be a problem because we have to fill up the bottom part of the water first and then start heating up the liquid. Obviously, the liquid temperature is not in the right place for this. Anyways, another thing I have in mind is make more tutorial videos on Oxygen Not Included, maybe going along with the series that I'm producing. However, everything I'm doing in the series is going to be explained so well that it possibly already counts as a tutorial. Always leave a comment if you want something to be more specifically explained. What I don't like about this world is my transit tube system. I would like this to be much more organized, and I figured, why have all of these ladder and transit tube shafts? We technically don't need them. We needed them in the base game because the worlds were vastly bigger. However, right here, if we count this, it's like 128 tas in width. That is almost nothing, so I think one ladder shaft might actually do the trick. I also don't like the fact that I have atmosuit stations all over the place and that I'm distributing the oxygen into the entire base. I think I want to go with a more centralized system. That means we're also going to have a living area, which is going to be much bigger this time around, and whenever they leave this area, they will have to take an atmosuit with them. All the systems I'm gonna do are gonna be maintenance free, secure, and should last forever. For instance, I received a whole bunch of comments that I did some unnecessary stuff with all the securities and the sensors and everything right here. I could do it much more easily. However, this was hundreds of cycles ago when we built this, and I never had to tend to it again. No matter whether I had water or power, there is no way this system can fail. So that is going to be my plan for everything. I want everything a little more organized. We also want to improve on other systems such as this one here, which is basically just a power sucker. That was a little bit of an experimental build, but mainly we're going to focus a bit more on ratios. So for every material I'm using, I need a replacement for that material, and I want to make sure that the replacement adds up perfectly. So we're never gonna run out of sand or dirt or anything we require for our contraptions. So yeah, this is basically just a short video as an announcement. I'm now gonna, go through all the modules I have on this base again and quickly talk about them. It's not gonna be a normal length episode. I rather wanna focus on the planning for the next playthrough, which is gonna be the best ever! So I'm really hoping you're gonna tune in. You will not regret it. Alrighty, so for everyone who hasn't been watching regularly, let's get started with the small tour. We have our main power production right here with the solar panel array. This is also something I would like to change in the next series. We're still gonna make use of solar panels, but I find it kind of a boring power production. It is convenient, don't get me wrong, and we will take advantage of that, but we also want to focus on other things. My rocket program has never been automated, and we also only ever used the small rockets. That is something I'm definitely gonna change. We're gonna make much more use of secondary planetoids in order to ship resources forth and back. Up here in the corner we have our CO2 storage. Of course, this is a very simplistic storage. I would like to have this a little bit more slick, especially if we are collecting so much. But yeah, in the previous episode we kind of played around with it a little bit, and we were collecting the solidified carbon dioxide by just decreasing the temperature enough. Right below that storage we have our main battery cell. This is something we're gonna need a lot more of in the next playthrough, since we are gonna utilize more power with the plans I have in mind. But this is an industrial sauna. Everything built out of steel so it can heat up as much as it wants. And on the top there are the steam turbines taking care of the heat with a cooling loop, of course. And now we can potentially expand this industrial sauna and put in as many machinery as we want that are producing unnecessary heat in our base. So looking at this is very useful in my opinion. Of course we have some heat leaking through the liquid locks. That might be something we can improve upon with a double liquid lock and a vacuum in between, or any other solution. We will figure out nice things for it. But yeah, in my example, I have a couple of refineries in here. We also have the glass forge in here, and we will never have to worry about the heat production of all those materials and machinery. Right next to it, we have our two geysers. They are producing water every now and then, salt water and polluted water, which is dripping in here. I'm then gonna heat it up to a acceptable temperature, such as plus 15 degrees. And we are then pumping it downwards into our storage system. First, it is going into this mixed pool. From the mixed pool, I'm pumping everything up through this desalinator. In order to make this more efficient, we would need multiple desalinators. The desalinator is taking care of the brine, for instance, and then all the polluted water and normal water is going through the water sieve as well. Everything is then coming out as normal water. However, it is still germy, which is why we are leading it through a chlorine chamber to get rid of all the germs before it then finally ends up in this water pool right here, which is the freshwater pool that I can use for all the contraptions that require water, such as my oxygen system. It is also providing water to my secondary world over there in order to activate the oil wells, which are then bringing oil back into this world. Then speaking about the oxygen system, we can see that right here. This is a simple cooling loop in order to eventually cool down the oxygen. The oxygen is being produced right here with a Rodriguez contraption. If we have a look at the gas pipes, we can see the hydrogen is being used to produce a little bit of extra power. And then we have 3 full oxygen pipes which are distributing themselves among every contraption and facility that requires oxygen. Through these metal tiles, it is being cooled down, so the cooling loop as well as the oxygen is going through these metal tiles in order to cool to the appropriate temperature. So right here it is still hot, and then right here we are getting into the green. And this is basically how I cool down the entirety of the planetoid just with the oxygen. Here we have a bunch of leftover machines that haven't found a home, such as the exosuit forge, the rock crushers, and my kilns. We also have a couple of beds to take care of everyone. Then we get to the critter farms. I built a magnificent tower of critter farms. I actually am really fond of this design. However, this is also going to change with the plans I have for the new world, and it's going to be made much more ingenious and automatic. I also don't like the fact that they have to switch into a atmosuit every time they want to enter here. Right here, this was a little mistake that I never fixed, but the grub fruit plants of course cannot survive in chlorine. But essentially we have stone hatches in order to produce coal. We then have a couple of dracos in order to use their scales to produce reed fiber for our atmosuits. We then have a bunch of sweetles. They are purely here for getting more food. And no, actually they produce something very specific here. I believe it's the sucrose. Yeah, there we go. They eat sulfur and produce sucrose, which I can then use in order to feed the grubs, right? Because they in turn eat the sucrose. So I'm basically using the sweetles in order to produce food for the grubs, which are taking care of my farms. That is another thing I want to take more advantage of in the next playthrough. The grubs are then eating the sucrose. They will be producing mud, which I then can use in order to produce more water if I want to. And then finally at the bottom we have the poke shells, and they are producing sand for me. So that is a medium that is running out once we dug up the entirety of the planetoid. Of course right now we still have plenty of sand, but the poke shells will be the solution to get rid of your polluted dirt and in order to produce sand. We then have a system here in place with the incubators. How this is working is basically whenever we have an egg laying here, duplicants are gonna try to put it into the incubators first. If all the incubators are occupied, they will be cracking it and cooking some omelets with them. Whenever an egg has incubated, the duplicants will automatically bring it over here in case we don't have enough critters in the farm. However, if we have enough critters in the farm and they are still hatching, then of course they just remain here, and all the creatures right here I eventually can kill off, for instance when we have a food crisis, and so we will be getting a little bit more barbecue. So together with the farms, this is essentially my way to get all the food that I want. Right here, I just have a mixed pool of stuff that I don't know where to store. The next contraption that we built quite early in the series is the plastic and petroleum production. In these 2 reservoirs, I'm storing some oil, and then right here, I'm storing the petroleum. So whenever we don't have enough petroleum, somebody's gonna take care of that oil refinery, and then we are also producing plastic here at the bottom. And of course, everything is contained because this is a very hot room, and everything is automatic. So ever since I built this room and finished it, I didn't have to take care of anything. We always have enough plastic. Well, a certain amount of plastic. It is not necessarily enough. Yeah, actually this is definitely not enough, but as soon as I have 2000 kilograms of plastic, these polymer presses are stopping their work, and whenever we use the plastic, they are restarting again. So it's always a certain amount of plastic we keep in the base. Next up, 1 level further down, we have this contraption which is basically getting rid of the natural gas that is being produced by the oil refinery, as well as on my second planetoid we have a whole bunch of natural gas that is being produced by the oil wells. So the natural gas and oil will be pumped into my first base through the teleporter. And then if we check this out, there are pipes connecting all the way up to this room, even the oil pipe right there. And they are going directly into these natural gas generators. So whenever I have too much natural gas, I'm basically just using this to get rid of the natural gas so it doesn't accumulate too much. This was a very useful addition, but not necessarily the way I would build it right now. Then at the bottom we have a recent contraption that is basically a arbitrary farm using the lumber in order to create some ethanol. Then it's going into petroleum generators, and it's basically one cycle that takes care of itself. The ratios at the moment aren't perfect, and I still have some pips in there, which is why we can see a bunch of arbitraries without irrigation. But that was actually a really nice experiment. I'm definitely going to do something with that in the next safe game. Now, what else do we have here? Yeah, I think that was essentially it. Of course, there's the living space. After their shift, they basically go into the bathroom in order to take a poop. Then they will go out, wash their hands, they will grab some food and eat it right there. And if they have some time left, they will spend it in this room with the jukebox, for instance, in order to gain some more morale. After that, they are going through the nature reserve, they are taking a little nap, and when they go out, in case they don't have the buff just yet, they will go through the nature reserve again, getting a 6+ bonus in morale. On the top, I have all my cooking stuff and everything, and we are also bringing the food right here into a chlorine pocket with a little trick, which is essentially gonna keep the food fresh forever and also germ-free. This complex here is not a bad idea, however, I still have a couple of ideas on how to improve on that and make it much better and more useful to me. Now let's go all the way down into the cellar. Right here, we dug this up recently, and what we built here just for shits and giggles is a petroleum generator using a minor volcano. It is not producing petroleum at an alarming rate, so eventually we would want to tap into all of our volcanoes. I mean, for instance, we have 2 more minor volcanoes that we could take advantage of in order to add to this petroleum generator. And then finally here at the bottom I have my backup power. So whenever there would be a time when we hook up too many machineries so that we cannot keep up with the power, this would actually kick in. This will be producing a lot of kilowatts for us, and it will actually only be using up the magma, something that isn't very useful to us anyways. So if I were to play this safe game for a couple more 1,000 cycles, I would probably use this contraption in order to get rid of most of the magma in this biome. Maybe eventually we would have to switch sides in order to take care of this magma as well, but essentially I can just keep on building these metal tiles, and they should be transferring the heat all the way up to the room. So maybe it would even work with just this contraption. But yeah, essentially that is it for this world at the moment. Of course, I had many other contraptions that we tore apart again because I considered them more or less temporary, and they served their purpose at some point, and they obviously became obsolete. If we check out the second planetoid, I essentially used this in order to dig up plenty of materials that I can bring into my main world for usage, and I also set up a mini base that is taking care of these duplicants. At the moment they have nothing to do, but yeah, I would use these duplicants mainly in order to take care of the oil wells, because this cannot be completely automated. At some point a duplicant has to come and take care of this. But yeah, since we didn't end up using as much petroleum as I anticipated, we basically just used one oil well. Maybe in the next safe game I'm gonna have more use for the oil. We will have to see how it goes. The second planetoid was never really a big problem. Also, the food they are actually getting from the first world. I'm bringing all the omelets over here, so this should be completely full of omelets. And it's also secure in a carbon dioxide atmosphere. Then as for the third planet, this was the biggest downside basically, because we had to ship stuff over with the rocket, and then there was Max, who was basically taking care of the entire base, and it was kind of a mess. It was extremely stressful, but you can see the third world is going to be very useful. I don't want to wait another 40 episodes to actually make sure that the third world is hooked up and we can use, for instance, the gold volcano. We have an aluminium volcano. I want to make use of all that stuff, and I have really great plans. I actually went into sandbox mode and started to design a couple of things to figure out how I want to do everything. And in my opinion, it's going to be extremely nice. I have a couple of good ideas. But yeah, the third planetoid is basically the shame of this playthrough. We will see how it goes in the future. This playthrough has been done without any mods whatsoever. I'm gonna install mods of convenience for the next playthrough, such as the Pliers mod and the Zoom mod. We're not gonna install anything that would change the gameplay in a way so that you couldn't follow it without mods, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that is essentially it. I really hope you enjoyed this series, and I'm hoping much more that you are gonna tune back in for the next series. It is very important that a lot of people watch the first episode and like it and comment on it and everything, so it can be picked up by the algorithm again. As you know, the more successful a series becomes on the channel, the more I can justify spending so much time on it. Give me a couple of days in order to make a really great first episode. The first episode is gonna be extremely important, and I want to make sure I do this right and I have everything set up the way I want it to. If you aren't yet, please subscribe and maybe even hit the bell icon in order to get the recommendation for the next series. This was something that went absolutely wrong with City Skylines, for instance. When I started the new playthrough, an extreme amount of people didn't get the notification for that, and even weeks later I got messages about people who weren't aware that there was a new City Skylines series, and I actually ended up aborting the series completely, and I would like this to not happen with the new Oxygen Not Included series, so it's really dependent on you guys. That's just the sad truth of YouTube at the moment, and I hope you can understand. But yeah, with that out of the way, have a great time, and hopefully I'm going to catch you in the next video. Bye bye.